My fingers trace the cold glass of the office window. Below, the city lights stretch like a spilled galaxy. Up here, on the 30th floor, it's quiet. Too quiet. The air conditioning hums a low, mechanical funeral dirge. My breath catches in my throat. It's just a document on the screen, lines of text, numbers, digital signatures. But it feels like a physical blow. A fist to the gut. The kind that steals your air and makes the world tilt. The company letterhead stares back at me. Our company. The one we built brick by brick, late night by late night, dream by dream. And then the names. His name. And hers. Not just listed.
Signed.
Witnessed. A transaction complete.
My share. Gone. To her.
The numbers don't lie.
The digital ink is dry.
It's done. The silence in this empty office is deafening now. It screams betrayal. It echoes with the sound of a life cracking open. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life back then felt solid. Like a well-built house. Not a mansion, not yet, but sturdy. Foundation laid with years of sweat and shared ambition. Mark and me. Partners. In life, in business. We started small, a tiny office, cheap coffee, big ideas. He had the vision, the big picture brain. I had the drive, the meticulous focus, the ability to translate his grand plans into actionable steps, to manage the chaos, to build the structure. We were a unit, a force. People used to say it, shake their heads in admiration, or maybe a little envy. They complete each other, they'd say. A true power couple, I believed it. Our company grew. We developed the software, revolutionizing logistics, making supply chains hum. It wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. And it made money. Good money. Enough to move out of that first cramped office into larger spaces, eventually into this tower, high above the city. We hired people, built teams. Mark was the face, the charismatic leader, the one who spoke at conferences. I was the engine, the COO, the one who made sure the wheels didn't fall off, the one who handled the finances, the operations, the legal structure. 50-50. That was the deal from day one. Our names on the founding documents, side by side. 50% for him, 50% for me. Equal partners. Equal owners. Equal say. It felt right.
Fair.
The bedrock of our partnership. Our home life was intertwined. Dinner conversations were often about work. Weekends sometimes bled into brainstorming sessions. It wasn't a burden, though. It was our life. Our creation. We were building a future, together. A secure future, filled with the fruits of our labor. Holidays, travel, the comfort of knowing we had built something real, something lasting. We talked about retirement, about maybe stepping back eventually, letting the next generation take the reins. We had dreams of a quiet life by the coast, watching the tide come in, finally resting. It all felt within reach. Tangible. Built on that solid foundation. I trusted him implicitly. He was my husband, my best friend, my business partner. The lines blurred, of course, but that felt like a strength. Who better to trust with everything than the man you built everything with? His decisions were my decisions and mine were his. His signature on a document was an extension of my own will. His words were truth. His presence was security. That kind of trust isn't given lightly. It's earned over years, through shared struggles, through mutual respect, through weathering storms side by side. I had given him every ounce of it I possessed, and he had seemed to cherish it. Then a tremor. Subtle at first. A late night at the office that stretched into dawn. A business trip extended unexpectedly. A new phone with a number he was cagey about. The usual signs, I suppose, but I dismissed them. Stress of the business, I told myself. He's the CEO. The pressure is immense. He needs space. He needs whatever it was he said he needed. My focus was always on the business, on making sure the structure we built remained sound. I plunged myself deeper into the work, managing the growth, optimizing the operations, securing the finances. I tightened our internal controls, dotted the I's and crossed the T's on every legal document, every share issuance, every board minute.
It was second nature to me.
My domain, the intricate web that held our company together. The first real crack appeared when I noticed a discrepancy. A minor one, initially. A payment processed without the usual layers of authorization I had put in place. I flagged it. Asked Mark about it. He brushed it off. Executive privilege, he'd said with a tired smile. Needed it done fast. Expedited process, I didn't like it. It went against the protocols I had implemented specifically to prevent unauthorized transactions. But I let it go.
He was the CEO.
Maybe just this once he knew better. But then there were others. Small things. Suppliers paid exorbitant amounts without competitive bids. Consulting fees to obscure firms with no clear deliverables. Expenses filed for travel I knew he hadn't taken for company business. Each one a tiny prick, eroding the polished surface of my trust. I started quietly, meticulously looking. Not because I suspected marital infidelity yet. No, my mind went to business first. Was someone defrauding him? Was a vendor ripping us off? My focus was on protecting the company. Protecting our company. And that's when I found her name, tucked away in a consulting invoice. A large sum. For strategic advisory services, I'd never heard of the consultant. I cross-referenced the name. It led to a social media profile. And a picture. A picture of her. With him. Not a business picture. A vacation picture. Sun-drenched, intimate. My blood ran cold. The infidelity was a shock, a punch I hadn't braced for. It shattered the image of our marriage. But the consulting fee, that was business. That was fraud. Using company money to fund a personal affair. That broke the other bedrock. The business one. Our partnership. The trust one had placed in him as a co-owner. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was stealing from the company. From us. From himself, in a way. I confronted him. Not about the affair, initially. My mind was still processing the business implications. Who is this? I'd asked, sliding the invoice across the table. He didn't even flinch. Not really. A brief flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, quickly masked. Consultant, he said, too calmly. Helping with market penetration lies. Smooth, practice lies. I pushed. Showed him the picture. That's when the mask slipped. Anger. Defensive, volatile anger. He turned it back on me. Spying on me now, he'd roared. Checking up on every little thing? Maybe if you weren't so consumed with your spreadsheets, you'd notice there's more to life. He stormed out. The days that followed were a blur of cold silence and quiet accusations. The business became a battleground, though undeclared. I dug deeper. Found more transactions. More consulting fees. More expense reports for non-existent trips. It wasn't just funding the affair. It was bleeding the company dry, slowly, steadily, to support a lifestyle I didn't know he was living. He was treating our shared creation, our livelihood, our future, like his personal piggy bank. And she was helping him, aiding and abetting the theft. And then came the document, the one that took my breath away. The share transfer agreement. A significant portion of my 50%. Transferred. To her. Not sold. Not gifted as part of a settlement. Transferred. With my purported signature. For a nominal amount. A fraction of their value. It was a forgery. A blatant, audacious fraud. He hadn't just cheated on me. He hadn't just stolen from the company. He was trying to steal my ownership. My stake. My identity, almost, because this company was so woven into who I was. The shock wore off, replaced by a cold, hard rage. He was trying to cut me out completely. Take the company, take the assets, take the future we had built together, and hand it over to his mistress. The sheer arrogance of it. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was a physical threat to my financial survival, to everything I had worked for. I tried to reason with him, to appeal to the years we had shared, the dreams we had built. It was useless. He was a stranger. His eyes were cold. He denied the forgery. Said I must have signed it and forgotten. Said it was necessary for restructuring. Said I was being emotional, hysterical. He gaslighted me with a practiced cruelty that made my skin crawl. He had clearly planned this. This wasn't a sudden impulse. This was calculated. He wanted me out, and he wanted her in. The legal options seemed limited, initially. A share transfer, even if forged, could take years to untangle in court. A messy, public, expensive battle that would likely damage the company, potentially destroying the very thing I was fighting to save. He knew this. He was betting on it. Betting on me being too devastated, too overwhelmed, to fight back effectively. Betting on me walking away with nothing but the wreckage of my marriage. He started making moves within the company, using his position as CEO and now, effectively having control over my transferred shares. Though the board hadn't formally recognized the transfer yet, that was his next step. He began marginalizing me, excluding me from meetings, changing reporting structures so my teams answered to others loyal to him or to her. My access to financial data became restricted. The controls I had painstakingly put in place were dismantled one by one. He was systematically stripping me of my authority, my information, my ability to do my job, let alone fight him. She appeared in the office, not hiding anymore, walking the halls like she owned the place. Her presence was a constant, sickening reminder of the double betrayal. She wasn't just the woman he cheated with. She was actively participating in his plan to steal my life. Her eyes, when they met mine, held a smug, entitled gleam. She was already measuring the drapes, settling into the life she thought she had been handed. My days became a living hell. I walked through the office I had helped build, feeling like a ghost. People avoided my gaze. Whispers followed me. The air was thick with tension and loyalty tests. My allies were few and far between, intimidated by Mark's position and the blatant power play. It felt like I was drowning, the walls closing in. Every door I tried seemed locked. Every path forward seemed blocked. The deeper I sank into this corporate and personal nightmare, the more desperate the situation became. It felt like I was losing everything: my husband, my company, my identity, my future. He had played his hand, and he was winning. Or so he thought. I sat alone in my silent office night after night. The forged signature, the illicit payments, the restructuring designed to sideline me. It all swam in my head. I had built the financial systems. I had drafted the legal framework. I knew this company's bones better than anyone, better even than Mark, who focused only on the shiny exterior. I knew where the bodies were buried. I knew the rules. And I knew how he had broken them.
It hit me then.
The share transfer was the symptom, not the disease. It was the endgame of his personal betrayal. But his methods? The use of company funds for personal gain? The unauthorized transactions? The deliberate circumvention of financial controls? The forging of a signature on a company document? Those weren't just marital issues. Those were corporate issues. Breaches of fiduciary duty. Fraud against the company itself. Violations of the very bylaws and regulations I had written to protect this entity. He was fighting me on the battlefield of our broken marriage, using the share transfer as his weapon. But I could fight him on my battlefield, the one I knew intimately, the battlefield of corporate governance, the legal frameworks, the paper trails. He thought he had trapped me in a personal dispute over share ownership. But he had left himself exposed on a different front entirely. He had committed fraud against the company, and that was a crime. That was grounds for dismissal. That was grounds for legal action brought by the company, or by someone acting on its behalf, like a concerned director. I wasn't just the wronged wife anymore. I was a director, an officer, with a duty to the company. His actions weren't just a betrayal of me. They were a betrayal of it. And the board had a duty to protect the company from such breaches. My perspective shifted completely. The raw emotional pain was still there, a constant ache beneath my ribs. But it was overlaid with a fierce, cold clarity. I stopped focusing on the injustice of the share transfer itself, for now. I started focusing on his actions as CEO. his abuse of power, his misuse of company funds, his systematic dismantling of internal controls, his fraudulent activities within the company structure. The forged signature on the share transfer document wasn't just proof of his attempt to steal my shares, it was proof of his willingness to commit forgery on a corporate document. That was the key. Not the ownership, but the crime committed using corporate resources and within the corporate structure. I began working in secret.
Nights, weekends.
I wasn't just sifting through current data, I was going back years, tracing the patterns, cataloging the discrepancies, building a timeline of his financial misconduct within the company. I compiled the evidence methodically, quietly. The fraudulent invoices, the shady consulting agreements, the suspicious expense reports, the communications that revealed his intent, the digital footprint of the forged signature, everything. I didn't need to prove the affair to the board. I didn't need to prove the emotional betrayal. I needed to prove corporate fraud, breach of trust, abuse of position. It was exhausting, terrifying work. I lived in fear of him finding out, of being locked out of the systems entirely before I finished. Every late night was a gamble. Every document I copied, every email I archived, felt like an act of espionage. I felt utterly alone. My few remaining allies in the company were nervous, afraid for their own jobs. The mistress was consolidating her position, attending executive meetings, her influence growing. Mark seemed more confident than ever, oblivious to the quiet storm gathering beneath the surface. He saw my isolation, my reduced role, and mistook it for defeat. I started reaching out, not to the board as a whole yet, but to individual members, those I thought might be receptive, those who had a stake in the company's integrity. I didn't reveal everything at once. I planted seeds of doubt, asked probing questions about financial controls, expressed concerns about recent strategic decisions that seemed to benefit certain
Consultants.
I gauged their reactions, noted who seemed concerned, who seemed indifferent, who seemed already under Mark's sway. It was a delicate dance. One wrong step, one hint of my true purpose, and he would crush me. He had the power, the money, the position. All I had was the truth, meticulously documented, and the faint hope that corporate integrity still mattered more than personal loyalty to him. The pressure mounted. He announced a plan to streamline operations, a move that would effectively eliminate my department entirely. The timeline was accelerating.
He was closing in.
It was now or never. The board meeting was scheduled for a Monday morning, a routine quarterly meeting. Except I had quietly requested time on the agenda to discuss urgent matters related to corporate governance and financial controls. The title was deliberately dry, bureaucratic, designed not to raise alarms with Mark. He probably expected me to complain about my reduced authority or argue about budget cuts. I walked into the boardroom that morning feeling a strange mix of terror and resolve. Mark was already there, smiling, chatting easily with board members. The mistress sat beside him, radiating a quiet confidence. They looked like they had already won, like I was a minor annoyance they had to tolerate before moving on. The meeting proceeded through the usual points: financial reports, market updates, strategic initiatives. My turn came late in the agenda. The air shifted slightly as I stood up. Mark gave me a condescending smile. "Agnes," he said, "I understand you have some points of concern?" His tone implied they were trivial. I didn't respond to him directly. I addressed the board. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled slightly holding my presentation clicker.
"Thank you," I said.
"I've prepared a brief presentation regarding recent activities that I believe constitute significant breaches of corporate governance and fiduciary duty by our CEO." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Mark's smile froze. The mistress's eyes widened, losing their smugness. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke calmly, factually. I presented the invoices, the consulting fees paid to the mistress, detailing the lack of deliverables, the clear personal relationship. I showed the expense reports, cross-referenced with travel records proving the trips were personal, not business. I laid out the pattern of dismantling internal controls, providing specific examples and dates. I showed emails, his own words confirming his intent to bypass standard procedures. Then I dropped the final piece. The share transfer document. I projected it onto the screen. This document purports to transfer a significant percentage of my shares, I said. Shares held since the company's founding. It bears a signature alleged to be mine. I paused, letting that sink in. I did not sign this document. It is a forgery. I didn't accuse him directly in that moment. I didn't need to. The implication hung heavy in the air. I showed the board analysis from a forensic document examiner I had quietly consulted, detailing the inconsistencies in the signature, confirming it was not mine. I linked this act of forgery to his pattern of using company resources and position for personal gain, framing it not just as a personal attack on me, but as a fraudulent act carried out within the company's legal framework, impacting its cap table and potentially its future valuation. I didn't plead or beg. I presented the facts. The cold, hard evidence of his actions. His systematic abuse of power, his financial improprieties, his ultimate attempt to defraud me and potentially the company itself through forgery and unauthorized transfers. As officers and directors, I concluded, my voice gaining strength, we have a fiduciary duty to this company. To protect its assets, its integrity, and its shareholders. Mr. Smith's actions constitute a clear and undeniable breach of that duty. His continuation as CEO and as a director poses an existential risk to the company he was entrusted to lead. I stepped back from the podium. The silence returned, thicker than before. Every eye in the room was on Mark. His face had gone pale. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving a sallow, ashen mask. His eyes darted between me, the screen, and the faces of the board members. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The mistress looked equally stunned, her face a mask of disbelief and fear. One of the board members, a man who had always valued integrity, spoke first. His voice was low, grave. Mark, do you have a response to these allegations? Mark sputtered. Absurd.
Lies. She's
unstable. This is a personal vendetta. She's upset about recent changes. He waved a hand vaguely towards the mistress. His voice was rising, losing its earlier calm. He was unraveling. He hadn't prepared for this. He thought I was defeated. He thought I would attack on personal grounds. He hadn't expected me to use the very structures I built to expose his corporate crimes. Another board member, the company lawyer, spoke up. Agnes's evidence. The documentation. The forensic report. It appears substantial, Mark. The unauthorized expenditures alone are highly concerning, not to mention the purported share transfer. The tide had turned. I could see it in their faces. They weren't seeing the angry wife anymore. They were seeing the meticulous COO, the co-founder who understood the company's intricate workings, presenting undeniable proof of malfeasance by the CEO. My detailed, unemotional presentation of corporate fraud was far more damaging than any emotional appeal about marital betrayal could ever be. I had used his own actions within the company structure to dismantle him. The questions came swift and sharp. They focused on the financial controls he had disabled, on the purpose of the payments to the mistress's company, on the forged signature. Mark stammered, denied, deflected. But his defenses crumbled under the weight of the evidence. He had no answer for the documented transactions, the bypassed procedures, the forensic analysis. Finally, the chairman spoke. His voice was heavy with disappointment. This is unacceptable, Mark. Given the severity of these findings, the board must take action. We will need to discuss this in executive session. Mark, we require you to leave the room. Mark stared at the chairman, disbelief warring with panic. Leave? You can't. I'm the CEO. Effective immediately, the chairman said, his voice firm. The board needs to convene without you present. Your access to company systems is suspended pending the outcome of this discussion. Security will escort you. It happened fast. Mark's face crumpled. The color completely drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly gray. His eyes rolled back. He made a choked sound, half gasp, half groan. And then he collapsed. slumped forward in his chair, then slid to the floor in a heap. The mistress screamed. Chaos erupted. People rushed forward. Someone called for a doctor, for an ambulance. The mistress knelt beside him, crying his name. I stood rooted to the spot, watching the scene unfold like it was happening to someone else, in a different room. The man I had built my life with, the man who had tried to steal everything from me, now lying broken on the floor of the boardroom.
Defeated. Exposed.
His carefully constructed world shattered in an instant. The ambulance sirens wailed faintly from 30 floors below. Paramedics worked over Mark. The mistress hovered, frantic. Board members stood around, shaken. The meeting was suspended. The silence in the room, which moments ago had been thick with tension, was now filled with the quiet efficiency of medical professionals and the muffled sounds of distress. I felt nothing at first, just a strange, cold emptiness. The adrenaline drained away, leaving me hollowed out. I had won. The meticulous work, the calculated strategy, the terrifying confrontation, it had worked. He was out.
Exposed.
His attempt to steal my company, my future, had backfired spectacularly. He hadn't just been removed, he had collapsed under the weight of his own undoing. Later, the board reconvened. Without Mark. Without the mistress. They asked me questions. Not about the affair. Not about my emotions. About the evidence. About the financial controls. About the future of the company. They confirmed the suspension of Mark, initiated an internal investigation based on the evidence I provided, and discussed the interim leadership. They reinstated my full authority, giving me the mandate to restore financial integrity and oversight. My shares, they confirmed, were mine. The forged document was irrelevant. They would never recognize it. My ownership was undisputed. I walked out of that building that evening not as a wronged wife or a defeated partner, but as a director with a clear path forward. The air outside felt different. Lighter, somehow. The city lights no longer looked like a spilled galaxy of sorrow, but like points of light in a vast, complex system I was still a part of. The victory was cold, bittersweet. I had saved the company I helped build. I had exposed the fraud. I had ensured that his calculated betrayal backfired in a devastating way. But the cost was immense. My marriage was over, irrevocably shattered. The man I loved, or thought I loved, was a stranger, a criminal exposed. The future I had planned was gone, replaced by an uncertain, solitary path. I learned that day that betrayal, especially by someone you trust completely, creates a specific kind of wound. It doesn't just hurt, it rewrites your history, your understanding of the past. But I also learned that while you can't control other people's actions, you can control your own response. You can choose not to be just a victim. You can use the pieces of the life they tried to shatter to build something new, something stronger. The company is rebuilding. There's a lot of work to do to undo the damage he did, financially and culturally. The mistress is gone. Mark is dealing with the legal consequences of his actions, both corporate and potentially criminal. My focus is forward. On the company. On the people who still believe in what we built. On making sure this never happens again. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my office, I look out at the city lights. The silence is still there, but it doesn't scream betrayal anymore. It feels
quiet,
like a pause, a space to breathe. The foundation was cracked, yes, but it didn't crumble. I reinforced it. I rebuilt. And the house still stands. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version in the comments below. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.